Good. Well, it's just after the hour. We've still got some people joining, but I think we'll kick off and start our first World Quality Week 2025 webinar. First of all, welcome to everybody. It's World Quality Week, and looking at all the comments in the comments section, it looks like we've got folks all the way from the Americas to the Philippines and from the north in Sweden down to Africa. So welcome everybody wherever you are. My name is Vince Desmond. I'm the Chief Executive of the Chartered Quality Institute. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar from isolation to innovation. Before we start, a few logistics. We will be recording this session. So that'll be for members who can't make the event today. All the microphones are set to off because, as you'll see from the participants, we've got quite a few online. We do, however, have a Q&A button down at the bottom of your ribbon. So if you have questions, comments that you would like to put forward to Nicole and me, we will be making time for some discussion after Nicole's shared her thoughts with us. So with that, from isolation to innovation. So this year's World Quality Week theme is Think Differently. And we are, of course, in different times. Geopolitics and geoeconomics are shifting markets and supply chains. The digital agenda is opening our eyes to how and where quality can be managed. Of course, the climate and sustainability and circular economy agendas are changing the nature of how people think about what makes a quality product, a quality service, and a quality organization indeed. So the context is there for us to think differently. And in my opinion, it's a really good opportunity for quality management to make an impact and for quality professionals to make an impact. Now, I'm delighted to have Nicole joining us today, and she's talking about an important topic, from isolation to innovation. As we've been working with individual and corporate members over the past 5 years or so, a number of key issues have come up in terms of challenge and opportunity. Of course, there's a digital agenda. Of course, there's a sustainability agenda. But I think one of the really important topics is where and how quality is managed. As quality folks, you will know that good quality and bad quality comes from the business. So managing quality in the wider business is something that we should be aspiring to enable, not operating from a basement and back office. So I'm really pleased that we've got Nicole here to talk about her views and also her experience in moving from isolation to innovation. Now, Nicole has worked within the pharmaceutical industry for over 10 years, although I'm sure that her experience and her ideas are applicable to all sectors and all industries. She's been leading compliance across a range of business models and through different regulatory challenges. And after establishing new quality systems and training programs globally, her passion is now in supporting companies with business expansion and demonstrating the value that quality management and quality teams can add when properly understood and supported. So Nicole, it's a joy and a pleasure to have you with us today. We very much look forward to listening first of all, and you and I having a conversation after that. So over to you.
Thanks, Vince. So I'm excited to be here and to talk to everyone about moving quality from working in isolation to actually go into this improvement culture and innovating in the future. So my background is in global pharmaceutical distribution, and by working with companies with different cultures and different levels of compliance, I've been able to see what things the good companies do well and which ones the companies that are struggling with could improve that makes a big difference to how quality is integrated to the wider company. There's a lot of talk nowadays about all the technology that can help us, and a lot of use of AI and, you know, all these great ideas. But it's still important to actually think about where we are right now and whether our companies are in a position to actually implement that, and how quality really facilitates that moving forward, and how we can all contribute to it as well. Because technically, you know, on paper, quality is involved in every process and every department. Most things will come under the quality management system. So why is it still so difficult to implement this into reality, and why do so many companies still struggle with it? Ultimately, it comes down to a combination of three things. So you have to have oversight, you have to have knowledge, and you also have to have these positive relationships. Because if any of these are missing, then compliance will start to suffer, and you won't be able to implement these, implement the right culture. So this is a visual representation of that, where, you know, the knowledge that we can bring along with the oversight that senior management can support with brings us to this level of compliance, and that's when continuous improvement can start. However, to actually get to innovation, you have to be one step ahead of that. And if you're trying to do things that, you know, are tailored to your company, if you want to do things that maybe someone else hasn't done yet, you have to have a very solid knowledge of all the risk areas, all the regulations, and also make sure that senior management are still giving that oversight and really building that culture within the company. The oversight does come from senior management, and this is what we hear spoken about a lot. Because if they see non-conformances as negative, if they see training as just a mandatory exercise and procedures are just for show, we don't actually get the benefit that can come from those things. So we don't get to see which areas have the most potential for improvement. We don't get to see which departments might be struggling with the training material, and we don't get to see actually what is changing within the business, because people aren't really taking the procedures seriously to start with. Whereas this knowledge and understanding is really where we can show our benefit to help help win collaboration from other people. So if we can demonstrate that we've got solid knowledge of the regulations and guidelines, which leads to safe business expansion, we understand the risk areas, which means we're not just copying other people, or we're not reliant on these external parties. And then we actually understand different perspectives within the business as well as our own teams. Then again, we can start to build these positive relationships for continuous improvement and innovation in the future. This is a narrative that we see a lot. So, you know, the quality team need help, the senior management team have to support quality, which again is completely true. But I'd like to see this shift between this is actually a company issue that quality can help resolve, where yes, there's standalone things that the quality team pick up and we identify the issues. But that doesn't mean that it's just an issue for our department. It actually affects the wider company and other teams as well. So how do you actually identify what you need to improve and what your level of each of these things is? Scenario one, if you have a good knowledge of the processes, you have kind of a solid understanding, and you also get this oversight from management, this will lead to basic compliance. So you might see regular use of the QMS, you might see that basic requirements are met by management, but because you don't have those positive relationships, you still see people being hesitant to ask questions. Depending where you are on the continuous improvement scale, you might see some proactive improvements, some reactive improvements as well. And you still have little intra-departmental meetings. So maybe quality interacts with management and management interacts with the wider company, but the departments don't interact with each other that much, which means you get little continuous improvement, and ultimately you just have complacency. this is a very good place to start, but it's important that, we try and avoid complacency, because that's where a regulation change, staff changes, this is where we can kind of fall below that level of compliance very easily. Scenario 2 would be if you've got a good knowledge of processes and maybe you've got positive relationships, maybe people are friendly to each other, maybe people get on well, but this would still only be temporary compliance unless you have that management oversight and that management support to actually really see quality as a benefit and see these non-conformances as improvement opportunities and implement that within the wider company. So you might have few non-conformances and infrequent disagreements because everyone's getting on, but no one's really taking it that seriously. Everyone's, not trying to rock the boat. You might hear people, oh, I don't want to fill in the paperwork, or, oh, let's just not do this, or, it's quite hard for quality to really seriously implement the quality management system throughout the business if the senior management team aren't providing that insight. And quite often it just feels like firefighting, where again you're not being proactive and you're finding out about issues after the event, which ultimately you just have unknown gaps, which are very difficult to complete ahead of time. If you have good oversight and maybe management are supportive and you have these positive relationships, this is still going to cause issues for your compliance because you don't have that knowledge and the understanding coming from the quality team. So you might have some documented non-conformances with nothing changing or nothing improving, and it's very tick box, it's very bare minimum. You're very, everyone's getting along and there's very little resistance between departments because everyone's scared to say things, or everyone just has a very they're relying on external parties essentially, just thinking, our last audit was okay, our competitors do it this way, so it must be fine. And ultimately, you're not interested in changing, and there's not a lot of effort going into quality in general. So if everyone knows what we should be doing and what the ideal culture looks like, why aren't more people doing it? And it really comes down to the main thing of being focused on the outcome rather than the process. So it's fairly easy to see if the commercial team are hitting their targets, if finance have hit their targets, and overall how the company is doing, from a financial and commercial point of view. Whereas with quality, it can be slightly more subjective. And it's important to remember that something with a 30% chance of going wrong will still be right 70% of the 70% of the time, which means, if someone in the business doesn't follow a process, but the outcome still gives the desired result, it's very difficult then to go to management and say, I know we got this, this really good deal, or this project went really well. However, XYZ wasn't done, which means from a quality point of view, it was actually really bad. And that result isn't reliable, it's not reproducible. But to the rest of the company, because the outcome was fine, it reinforces the fact that they don't necessarily need to follow the procedure or listen to quality. And again, from a quality perspective, there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of hoping for the best, which doesn't give you a lot of chance to improve. And how we can get over some of these things is to ultimately just start small. So acknowledge where you are and don't expect miracles overnight. We can work with other departments to show them that we value them as well, and try and have as many positive interactions as possible. Don't just go to people when things are wrong. Don't just ask for a meeting with management when you need their help. try and actually proactively enforce this good behavior by telling them the positive things as well. Because if 80% of your interactions are negative, whereas every time the commercial team speak to them, they're hitting their targets, again, this is where the impression of quality can be seen as quite negative, because we're not bringing that positivity to them as well. And ultimately, just it's a lot more respectful. Make sure things are evidence-based, but still be confident in your decisions. You know, provide context, provide a rationale for your choices, so that it's not just, oh, quality said no, or, you know, quality are essentially a barrier. Actually explain it to people. So with emails, then again, if you get asked a question and you can't do it, try to avoid just saying no, because that doesn't really give any context of how to improve in future. Whereas if you explain your reasoning and just acknowledge that, you know, we would like to do this, or technically we could do this, it's just not feasible at the moment. However, we can do it by this date. It gives the other person more of an idea of how you're prioritizing, and it also just can open a conversation up to actually how you work through that together to actually overcome some of the barriers that you foresee with it. And again, you aren't just saying no for the sake of it, you're actually explaining it to them. And again, when you speak about things, you know, if something's gone wrong, and maybe this person does keep making the same mistake, maybe it's a certain department, but just try not to use language which is very accusatory to start with. And again, if you're requesting things, try not to just send the request with absolutely no context whatsoever. This can create a very kind of us versus them. It also just doesn't really show our value very much. So if we're just telling people what went wrong, if we're just telling people that something needs to be done, we're not actually educating them in the knowledge that we have, or why we're essentially there to protect the company. Instead of, you know, these examples, you can say things like, just concentrate on the facts. So basically, instead of you did this, just say this happened and now it's a non-conformance, like, can we investigate it? You know, I noticed this wasn't done. Can we see whether we need to review the process? You know, if you've researched something and you've had to say no, let the other person know that you've actually taken the time to look into it. Because it's also quite easy to, from our point of view, to think they know we're really busy, they know that this takes a long time, but unless they actually know exactly what you're doing to address that request, again, we can't assume that they know how much effort goes into it. If you're asking people to do things, again, make it clear. So instead of just saying we need to change this process, just say to them, you know, at the moment it works like this, we think it could be better in this way, and that will lead to fewer deviations, or it'll achieve a better relationship with this department, or make this more efficient. Actually explain to them why you're making changes, and it's not, again, just for the sake of it, or just because you want to issue new training to everyone. And it's a lot more focused on the cause of issues rather than just whose fault it was. And again, this demonstrates our value a lot more in the knowledge that we bring to the company, rather than just this basic value of, is it compliant or not? It explains and helps to educate the wider company at the same time through these day-to-day requests. And I think it does come from the top, but it's also, it starts in the details. So are everyone's email signatures uniform? Does it all look like you're, you know, from the same company? Is everyone's perception of what someone does an accurate perception? This is especially important if you have multiple sites, or maybe you're working remotely. And for the perceptions, it's also how the quality team are kind of explaining themselves. So are we ensuring quality is maintained? Which, yes, that is true. But do we also, we basically facilitate quality management across business areas, and just being very intentional with the language that we use on documentation or training material or on our own internal org charts can make a big difference to actually perceiving us as part of the wider company rather than this standalone department, which is kind of isolated and no one wants to speak to. Because our main focus, rightly so, is quality. If you're anything like me, you will go home, you'll think about it some more, you'll think about it while you're eating breakfast the next day. But you have to remember that every other department is doing that as well. So it's not always the case that they just don't want to do it. It's just that they are focusing on their tasks and their targets and their day-to-day role as well. So we need to incorporate it into them rather than just kind of taking over. Because sometimes it can feel like especially the narrative sometimes is that quality is just trying to kind of outshine everyone. We just want to dull them down. We want to stop them working. We want to stop them progressing. And we're just kind of trying to fit ourselves somewhere where we shouldn't be. Whereas in reality, we just want to be treated equally to the other departments. It's whether we think quality is more important or not is irrelevant. We need everyone else to be on the same page. And once we start getting treated like the other departments, we can slowly help everyone to integrate into processes, make them more efficient and effective, and eventually everyone will be shifting to the same end goal. So instead of going to work every day and focusing purely on just what we're doing, you start to see procedures with the full picture. So if we change this part of the process, will it impact that department? Finance wants to change this, will it impact this other department? And that's really the culture that you want to build, where we're just all working towards the same end goal and not working in isolation or kind of being any more important than anyone else. Because again, there's a lot of reasons why people don't do things, and it's not always just because they don't want to. So have we explored whether they don't know how to? Maybe they don't know that they should. Maybe they get the same outcome an easier way. And again, this is very outcome focused. So if they're getting the same outcome and they're not having any negative consequences, or they're getting lucky essentially, how do we explain to them that yes, we're glad that in this instance it's all worked out well, but how do we make that reproducible for next time by updating the procedure and actually incorporating that risk mitigation so it's reliable? And I've just got a few examples of, again, how this looks like in reality. So if your senior leadership team if you have this culture, then it has to be very intentional long term. So it can't, try to avoid this complacency and thinking, oh, we're okay, so we don't need to improve anymore. They will have routine meetings with the quality team, even if things, seem like they're going well. They won't wait until something goes wrong to actually reach out. They also reflect on their own contributions. So again, this is where the resource management comes in, and how they're interacting with quality and distributing it in the wider company. They also promote critical thinking in all departments. So yes, we want people to follow procedures, but we also want them to think about why they're doing that. Because if they know why they're doing a certain process or following a certain procedure, that's when the people really doing the job can think about how to do it better, or think about how to do it more efficiently. And they will start coming forward with new ideas of, oh, I know we do this process for this reason. However, I think it can be done better in this other way. And they also show through actions, not words. So, It's not just, oh, it's my company, so I'll do what I want. They also direct the other teams. If they have a new project, they encourage other teams to speak to the quality department. They encourage kind of these meetings between different people to make sure procedures are accurate. And they also acknowledge that even if you say no, again, you've spent time on it, you've looked into it properly, and they kind of see this proactive and reward the proactive mindset more. So it's not just, oh, we had this problem and you fixed it. It's like, oh, thanks for picking this up before it was a real issue. And you might hear them say things like this of, can you organise a meeting to discuss with the quality team and finance before proceeding so that everyone is in the same room, everyone can discuss a project and the end goal of it without encouraging these separate meetings or these, keeping quality separate. In the quality team, then again, we can have routine meetings with other departments, help everyone to see the value in their role as well of, yes, quality is mandatory, there's no argument about that, but that doesn't mean that other people's role in the company isn't valued as well. Provide solutions whenever we can, so even if we can't do things a certain way, try and provide an alternative. And if you can't provide an alternative or there's just no way of doing something, provide the explanation and context of why that is, because again, it helps to educate people instead of just, their annual training and telling them something. If you can explain it as you go along, that's when they really start to see this day-to-day collaboration more. And link the processes to the end benefit. Don't just tell people how what they should do, explain how they should do it as well. And just generally understand that our decisions do have a big impact. So how you portray those decisions makes a big difference. If someone else is excited about a project and you have to say no, then there's a certain way of doing that without just saying no straight away. You can say it, appreciate that they've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort looking into this as well. And again, try and refer to management in a positive way. So if you can't do something because maybe you don't have time, maybe you don't have the resource at the moment, or maybe your quality system just needs amending, then explain to the other person, like, let's have a meeting with leadership. You bring the reasons for doing this, and then we'll bring, the difficulties that we're facing. And then they can tell us whether this is a priority that needs doing or not, based on the resource that both of us need. This is just, again, kind of a random department. So with business development, they try, or just in general, the other departments, try and be curious about the processes that they don't like. So if someone is coming to you and asking why they need to do something, that is a good start, because that opens the conversation of you explaining why it's so important, and then them explaining why they believe it could be done differently, or why it's kind of taken up so much of their time, or just again how it can be improved in future, or what's going wrong. And they understand that quality is a facilitator. So again, they don't see quality as a barrier. They actually understand that by introducing quality early onto projects, then they see it as more of a facilitator rather than a barrier that they need to overcome. They understand that quality is a selling point, and they proactively cooperate with quality so that we can say that to, the customers, the suppliers, and other stakeholders. So they might say things like this, and this applies to any department. If, can you explain more about why we can't do this? I was looking at this earlier and noticed that this might be incorrect. And if anyone says any of these things, so that means that you're on the right path to actually being able to continuously improve and ultimately get to that kind of top right-hand quadrant of being able to innovate in the future. So in conclusion, I would say get curious. This is one of the most important things. And just start small. So if you can review just one part of one process, then that will help that department kind of see quality in a different way. And they might mention it to someone else, or you kind of build that snowball effect. And we all need to demonstrate our value through the knowledge. So instead of just telling people, you have to listen, you have to do this, etc., actually explain it to them in a way which educates them more than just creating what can be perceived as issues. And this also helps us stay confident. So again, it's less about whether someone likes you, it's less about whether you kind of get on with each other, because you respect that each person is doing their job and they know how to do that job well. So you're able to have that productive conversation without it kind of impacting the outcome of or impacting the wider business. And just focus on solutions, because essentially it doesn't matter kind of in the initial moment, it doesn't matter who you blame, because you, again, just need to focus on the outcome. And that is everything. So I think, yeah,
Well, thank
that's
you
the
very
key,
much,
really.
Nicole. Yes, thanks for that. Well, I really enjoyed that. You talking a lot about how to position quality, if you like, as a function or a team or a department, um, and how to help the organization or help that team move to a sort of enablement or facilitation approach. Perhaps we can. Do you want to take the slides down, and then we can see each other a bit better? Brilliant. So perhaps I can just start with you, Nicole, because I sense from your presentation that perhaps you've been on a personal journey with this and maybe started from a point where you thought, hang on a minute, I'm operating in this sort of back office compliance mode, shooting and policing rather than enabling. Could you
Mm.
just maybe bring to life your personal journey on this and when light bulbs started going off and how you proceeded?
I think it's, yeah, I think it's just seeing the different how the different companies operate. So I think when I first, when I got my first job as head of quality, I think you kind of assume that people will listen just because we know how important quality is. We know that the company has to follow it, and there's not, no one really prepares you for the people that aren't going to listen. And I think it took me a long time. And it was only when I started to see the companies who do it well and do respect quality and kind of incorporate it into their business, of seeing actually, yeah, how they interact with each other, how, the language they use, and actually that it's almost humbling of we don't have this default, we don't just go into any company and people listen to us straight away. We have to actually meet them halfway, and sometimes just acknowledge that if certain departments have never done risk assessments before, or they don't understand those technical aspects, it's up to us to educate them and explain why we're important beyond just, passing an audit. And again, just understanding that everyone is everyone's just getting on with their day-to-day role. And it's not that they're not listening on purpose, it's just we have to also, yeah, just reach out to them.
So the light bulb went off for you in terms of seeing other ways of doing this stuff, did it?
Yeah, I think it was
And
just, yeah,
yeah,
seeing how the good companies do it and
yeah,
seeing the contrast.
yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. And you talked a little bit about facilitation and enablement. In fact, I wrote down the word humility as well as you were speaking,
Mm.
um, and sort of walking in the shoes of the rest of the business. Um, and you've given some tips and ideas for how you've done how one can approach that. Have you got don't name any particular companies, but have you got any personal experiences that you could give us where you've done that and the sort of results that you had in terms of moving from point A to point B, if you like, on how quality was perceived and perhaps even the sort of results they were delivering?
I think again, it's just more when it comes to procedures. I think again, we're told that we should involve the people that are doing the processes, and depends on the size of the company or which SMEs you have. People will even, get other people to write the procedures. Whereas I think it makes a big difference if you sit down together. So have that expertise of who's doing the job,
Yeah.
but also by us being involved in that process, we can learn from each other. And
Yeah.
if you do that with the logistics team, if you then do that with the finance team, etc., eventually you do just get this natural kind of cohesiveness, rather than, even if, just because you send a procedure to someone else to write doesn't
Mm.
mean that you're working together. That's still just them working and you
Yeah.
working separately. Whereas if you actually kind of share these ideas, it definitely helps to
Yeah.
to kind of build that.
Okay. And you've talked a lot about language, and this is a common accusation leveled
Mm,
against quality teams and quality folks, is that we speak the language of ISO and
mm,
regulation and that sort of thing, but we don't speak the language of the business.
mm.
So, I mean, I know in your work now you're engaging with firms and teams and other quality and regulatory folks. So how do you help the quality teams, the regulatory folks, the quality people, if you like, um, not just shift their thinking to walk in the shoes of the rest of the business, but to speak differently? Because you were giving examples of written speech or written communication
Mm.
and ways of communicating. Is that something that needs developing within quality teams in your work, do you see?
I think so. I think there's still, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of people who focus on, you know, we have this impression that if you use more technical language, you know more, or that means people should listen, whereas actually the value isn't in your prior experience and your qualifications. The value is in how the other person receives that. So if you can't explain it simply and in this way of quite a methodical way of, this is a problem, this is why we should change it, and this is how we can fix it, what's your idea, what's your view. And again, translate, you might read a regulation or a guideline or the ISO standard, but again, translating that into very simple terms of how it affects your business. So you can look at a regulation or the ISO standard, but if you can't translate that into your quality system or see which procedures or people are affected and then communicate that effectively, then there's actually, again, it's just that basic value of maybe you'll be compliant, but you'll never continuously improve because people
Yeah,
are just, yeah, they're not
yeah, they'll switch off.
understanding. Yeah.
They'll switch off if you give them quality mumbo jumbo. If you think about it in terms of
Mm.
value, performance,
And it
risk.
also just makes them feel like, oh, I don't understand that, so I'm not going to ask
Yeah.
again. So it's
Okay.
kind of, you have to relate it to their job so that they actually feel open, like they're learning things.
Okay. You talked in the discussion. There's some really interesting points you made about facilitating alignment across teams, because of course
Mm,
it takes a whole organization to deliver value and mitigate risk. You've talked about almost moving into a consultancy role at some points in terms of
mm,
helping, facilitating, enabling. Um, and there's always that question over quality, as an independent oversight
mm.
function, and then the sort of the business improvement, that almost like an internal consultant piece. How do you manage both of those sides, if you like?
I think again, it's, if quality is truly ingrained into those departments, then your reviews will highlight any gaps. So, if I'm trying to use kind of more generic company departments, but if you have,
Yeah.
say, a project team and, during that project implementation, there are either flags or checks or, either a quality check-in or someone else has to update quality,
Mm.
you don't have to act like the police so much, because if the culture is there and the management are promoting this and people do see these issues
Mm.
as areas to improve, you don't need to kind of
Okay.
police them because they will
So
come forward.
it's almost a
Or
question of maturity in that sense, then you can move into the more facilitation mode.
Yeah. Or yeah, just have a check-in, like a default check-in of, okay, what's going on? And then they
Yeah,
can tell you. So yeah.
yeah. I think that's really interesting. The enabling, facilitating, sort of almost the internal consultant piece. If
Mm,
you're able to help people sort of almost self-serve on the small Q stuff, you can help with the alignment
mm,
um, along the whole business. There's a question here from Sanjay. I've already given you the first part in terms of independence, but is there a best place for quality to report into? If it reports into operations, it's not independent. Should it
mm,
report into the senior leadership team, the CEO? Because then you really are seeing
mm.
across the whole business. Or does it not? Does it
I suppose
depend?
it's where it's most effective. So again, depends on the industry. Pharmaceuticals kind of has default. We have to report to kind of a license holder representative, which means that we do have that. Um, Essentially, you have the ear of the senior management team. But again, I would say it's just where it's most effective. So if you're reporting to the CEO, but they're too busy, or they're in a different country, etc., it might be better for you to report to someone else who does have that regular interaction with them. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily, for me, it leans more towards the operational part of the business because that's again
That's
going into
interesting.
the processes,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it would depend on the
yeah,
company.
yeah. So we've got some interesting questions coming up. One of them's on the leadership. You spoke quite a lot about leadership, and if you take a standards and regulatory approach to this, there's always, the leadership's responsible for everything, isn't it?
Mm,
The poor old leaders.
mm,
Um, and and quite often in how we talk about quality and standards and so on, regulation, well, that's all very well saying that. But um, how have you helped leaders in organizations understand the way you're trying to position quality in terms of value, but also understand their role in sort of getting what they want out of it in terms of, compliance, um, satisfied customers, um, the ability to
mm,
compete, market access, and also confidence that, the whole organization, the whole value chain sort of humming along nicely
mm,
together to deliver and
mm.
improve that. Because it's not, I'm assuming you can't simply put a requirement in front of them. You've got to do more than that. And I'm not sure we're very good at the facilitation enabling side of things with those
Mm.
those folks. What's your views on that?
Again, I think there's a lot of focus on explaining to senior management that just because they have an ISO certificate or a certain license doesn't mean they're always compliant.
Mm,
And I think there's almost too much focus on trying to explain that to them.
mm,
Whereas if we just say to them, if you think we're compliant with that ISO certificate,
mm,
fair enough. However, again, for XYZ reasons, this outcome isn't reproducible, it's not reliable because the procedure wasn't followed, which is why I use the frame temporary compliance because
yeah,
it'll only be the next audit when something goes wrong or
mm,
if the sales start to drop, that they then turn around and say, we
mm,
didn't know this. So it's kind of explaining it in that way of if they want long-term results, they have to
mm,
have a procedure. And essentially, if they're just going on this outcome or the fact that they have an ISO
mm.
certificate, that doesn't mean that that's going to be long term.
Yeah, so I think, that there's danger in that, that sort of limited view of things. I mean, the research has shown that quality culture and the way organizations and people and teams buy into this stuff is heavily reliant on message consistency
Mm,
from leadership, message continuity. So
mm,
whatever the topic is, whether it's quality, safety,
mm,
whatever it might be, cybersecurity, I suspect these days is a big one.
mm.
That and how have you helped quality, sorry, not quality leaders, leaders in organizations, if you have, with that sort of messaging and how they talk about it and where they talk about it and how often they talk about it?
Uh, I think it's more just again showing the value. So it's kind of instead of having people have these. I think the most common thing in the companies that struggle is that the management team might think they're doing something well by having a meeting with all these different departments, but they have those meetings separately. So trying to bring everyone into the same room, where yes, it might be a longer meeting, or it might be a bit more difficult to start with, but ultimately it means that everyone has those same expectations, and you can build the process with other people rather than it just being, again, very fragmented.
Right. You mean within a process or across the business?
Yeah.
Across the business.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
both. So it's like
Both.
if there's a
Yeah.
process,
Yeah. Of
because a lot of
course.
processes do run through different departments, or if
Yeah.
it's a new project, it will need
Okay.
several departments.
Okay. And we've got a big and a small question here to finish off with. So we've got somebody here working for a large complex organization with limited resources from the
Mm,
quality point of view, and obviously an interest in beefing up engage or the sort of things you've been talking about in the language and engagement and shifting from problem
mm,
solving to problem prevention and
mm,
innovation and things like that. How have you approached this, if you have, in larger
mm,
organizations where there's just so much to do? Where do you
mm.
start, I suppose, is the question.
Well, again, I think it comes down to this start small. And again, I don't think the things I spoke about actually necessarily cost more money. They might cost time, but again, we can, in the same way we tell senior leadership, spend some time fixing the culture for the long run. We also, as quality professionals, need to think, I can spend 2 minutes writing this email and get very little benefit from it. Or I can maybe, sometimes it takes me an hour to write an email, but at least I know that I have told that other person the kind of things they need to know for in future. So again, it's just taking that initial
Mm,
investment from ourselves, or
mm,
researching it and fully understanding it, so that we can show other
mm.
people that they can trust us and that we do know what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so I suppose it's finding those opportunities to make the engagement work and then building on that foundation so that gets around the business. And what about for either very small or very mature organizations where, it's just not, I mean, you probably haven't come across this in the pharmaceutical sector,
Mm,
but there are pharmaceutical startups and medical device, especially startups.
mm,
And when we look at what's going on in the digital sphere, there's lots of digital startups. And when you look again at the research into barriers and struggles for startups, I mean, obviously you've got things like funding and whatnot. Um, but one of the top five or six barriers is quality, compliance, certification,
mm,
regulation, things like that.
mm.
Have you got any tips for how to, get this stuff on the agenda when you're in that sort of environment?
I think the companies that I've come across are, in pharmaceuticals, everyone's very well aware of the
Yeah.
regulations because you can't start
Mm.
without it. And actually, what I think is sometimes an issue with them is that I've seen what it can be like the other way. So if you're trying to I'm saying that we need to collaborate, but the decisions ultimately still lie with quality in what
Yeah.
happens to be compliant. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes when that's not clear, or you have other people who think they can make that decision, then the dynamic shifts for the more negatively, in the sense that
Mm.
it's very difficult to get things done, or it's very difficult to follow a process because everyone thinks that
Mm.
they know best, and
Mm.
it's kind of directing it in that way of, yeah, I think quality should be facilitating the other
Yeah.
departments rather than
And I think that the other thing that the other word you that I noted down that you used was translate and in my interactions with the SMEs and the startups where they've got a quality uh, person involved with them is the translation bit and helping them understand what the requirements are,
mm,
from that side of quality, not
yeah.
not sort of the improvement excellence side of things, but more
Mm,
from the compliance side of things is translating that stuff so they can build that into their plans. I certainly think in our engagement with the UK regulators and standard setters that landscape of standards, regulation, and compliance requirements for startups is not easy to navigate. and that's something that we can help with. Look, I think I'm just gonna check through I think we've covered off most of the sort of questions here. I think in the comments, I haven't looked at the comments, but there seems to be lots of screaming agreement with you. And there are a few other questions and queries we've got in the Q&A here, which we won't have time to cover off. But Nicole, you very kindly wrote a piece for the CQI, which is on our website if people want to see it. Maybe I could ask you to take some of the questions and comments that have come out of this session and build on it with a follow-up article.
Yeah.
Would that be all right? I'm sorry to put you on the spot here and ask you to do more work.
No,
but that would be great. Okay, well, look, I'll say a proper thank you to you in a minute, Nicole, but that has been a very interesting conversation. And from the comments, I think it's a very important topic in terms of how we position, how we talk about, how we engage, how we facilitate, not just compliance, but, improvement. As Deming said, continuous improvement is going to keep you, is going to stave off going out of business, but it's innovating product and process and business models that's really going to keep you sustainable in the long term as a business. So let's not forget that. And thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Nicole, would you give me a couple of minutes? I've got a couple of announcements to make to the team that are online, and then I'll come back to you. Is that okay?
No, yeah, thank you.
Brilliant stuff. Okay. So folks, before we finish off and do a final thank you to Nicole, a few announcements for stuff that's coming up. This week in World Quality Week, we're very pleased to be launching our International Quality Awards that will be awarded in June 2026. The categories are now open. Here they are. We've got categories for individuals, emerging talent, quality professional of the year. We've got them for special topics, including digital transformation and developing quality talent. Maybe that's something Nicole wants to apply for, given that you seem to be developing quality talent within the pharmaceutical sector. We've got team awards, a quality organization of the year awards, and also our volunteering recognition and our outstanding contribution award. The last one is not open for entries, that's internally done. But all the others, if you'd like to go on to the CQI website, you can find out about those awards and how to apply. A great journey. All of our applicants find it extremely useful to write down what they've done, how they've done it, and the value they've created. It's a really good learning experience, and we're keen to share good, innovative thinking with the rest of the quality population. Secondly, on the next slide, our Quality Learning Hub, our e-learning hub, has some new courses. We've spoken a little bit about digital. We've got a new Quality 4.0 suite, including Future of Assurance, Quality 4.0 Essentials, Digital Transformation, AI, and Regulation. So if you'd like to scan the code there, you can go and have a look at those CPD courses. Obviously, discounts for members. Also, you can have a look on the website for that. In the next slide, we have got the next. Is that the next one? Yes, the next World Quality webinar that we're doing at the CQI with BSI, looking at the changes that may be coming to the ISO 9001 standard. That's coming up tomorrow. Is there a next slide? There is a next slide. On Thursday, we've got our third webinar, which is going to be really interesting, and it's very much linked to what Nicole's been talking about. And that will be the first glimpse, the first look at the outputs of some research that the CQI has been doing, working with the University of West Scotland on the concept of quality in a business partnering role. So very much building on what Nicole's been talking about. On the next slide, that's it. On the next slide, is just me and Nicole. So that leaves me just with the opportunity to say a huge thank you to Nicole for your talk. A huge thank you for the discussion we had, which I very much enjoyed. I hope you did too. We'll be releasing the recording later on this week. Nicole's very kindly agreed, in principle, I should say, to do a follow-up article if there's any questions or comments that she feels she can build on in terms of her thinking on this topic. And finally, it just remains for me to thank all of the folks that have been online today. We've got 160, I think, who've been online today. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you have a great week thinking differently about quality, not just with the CQI, but with your own organizations, your own teams, your own partners, suppliers, and value chains. Thank you very much. It's been good to be with you. We'll see you tomorrow for the next webinar. Goodbye.